Alright, man. Hold on, let me turn this TV off. Hey, man, I'm back, man. I forgot to shout out a bunch of people, and I feel bad, man, because people was letting me know about myself. So, first of all, let me shout out my college peoples. The whole MU, man, everybody doing their thing up in there. Everybody gonna graduate. Everybody doing their thing. About to get up out of there. But first of all, I can't think. I'm trying to think of people, man. Shout out to my wifey. Shout out to Tar. Shout out to Bree. Shout out to Sasha. Shout out to Morris, man. Everybody in Morris, man. My dude J Earl stay up in Morris. Man, what else? Shout out to Fee and Helen up in Emerson. Brittany. Man, shout out to Nene. Shout out to I'm tripping. I'm trying to think of quads. Shout out to the Zetas, man. Shout out to the Deltas. Shout out to the AKAs. Man, I'm tripping. Shout out to everybody from Cleveland, man. Shout out to who I ride in the car with? Ari and Maya. Shout out to Trish. Shout out to Troy and Simone. Man, who else was at the party, man? I'm trying to get everybody from MU out the way, man. Shout out to Terrence. Shout out to Tierra. Shout out to Abby. Shout out to Talia. Shout out to Sydney and Sierra. Man, shout out to my cousin Shannon. Shout out to Shayna. Shout out to Senna. Trying to think, man. Shout out to Rachel. Shout out to Fat. Oh, I forgot about Fat. I'm sorry. Shout out to Shout out to everybody in cohort A. Cohort A, we holding it down. We doing big things. Shout out to everybody on Mugs Exec, Big Will, you know what I'm saying, Jay Fells, Jeremy, all my tenors, you know what I'm saying, we holding it down, we doing big things. Kristen, I think, shout out to Marco, Aaron, Ian, DMG, trying to think. Shout out to Jan, my partner on the field experience. I think that's. Shout out to Hope. Shout out to Delana. Shout out to Honey. Shout out to Hammer. Shout out to man, everybody who cool with me, man. Everybody who cool with me. Shout outs to you. Shout out to Dominique. Man, another shout out to my boys, man. To Brian, Dalian, Charles, Donald, London, AT. You already know what it is. Shout out to Kev. I ain't trying not to forget nobody. Shout out to Big Joe. Shout out to Beth. Shout out to shout out to Toya. think that's about it. Okay. Now for the back home shout outs, because I forgot a bunch of people, man. I think. Shout out to Ashley, my boo. shout out to shout out to BJ. Shout out to Brianne. Shout out to Nicole. Shout out to Brianna. Oh, I forgot to shout out Moncrief. My fault, Moncrief. Shout out to Brittany. Shout out to shout out to Clarissa. Shout out to Danica. Shout out to Denise, best friend. Shout out to DL. Shout out to everybody from SAY, man. Everybody, I don't know everybody no more because it's just in branched off. Shout out to my cousin Dub. Shout out to Curse. Shout out to Gates. Shout out to Skrill. Shout out to Face, man. Shout out to Lil Polo. Let's say what. Trying to think, man. Shout out to Fat Fat. Shout out to George, man. Shout out to India. Shout out to Jack. Shout out to Jamila. Shout out to Jasmine. Jasmine P, Jasmine S, Jasmine F, Jasmine A, Jasmine H, Jasmine Hardy, Jasmine Head, Jasmine Irons. I know too many Jasmines. Shout out to my boo Brittany. Shout out to Jenny. Shout out to JoJo. Shout out to Katie. Shout out to Molly. Shout out to Lauren. Shout out to Lisa, best friend. Shout out to Morgan. Shout out to Teresa. Shout out to Pace. Shout out to Charles Mike. Shout out to Ray. Ray, a girl. Her name's Sheree, not Ray like in Ray, but like Rae. You feel me? Shout out to Rudy. Shout out to Ryan. Shout out to Sadara. Shout out to Sarah. Shout out to Shauna. Shout out to Timo. I think I shouted her out on the other one. I'm tripping. Man, that's it, man. I'm done, man. Shout out to everybody, man. Shout out to TV. Shout out to Vanessa. Shout out to Trav. Shout out to Will. Shout out to Mooch. Shout out to James. Shout out to U-Haul. I forgot about U-Haul, man. Big U-Haul. Shout out to Wade. Throw them threes up. Shout out to Wins. Shout out to Tanisha. I feel bad if I forgot somebody, man. Man, shout out to everybody who I forgot, man. It's no shot, man. Poetic Justice left the building.